It's only 2.4 kW. You can see the llama farm there. That was kind of a neat place too to visit. A lot of people will say that if you're going to put up a wind turbine, their biggest complaint is that it's going to wreck my view shed. So the next three pictures are showing what it really looks like. And the problem is that people picture utility-sized turbines and realize that this whole system, from the ground to the very tallest top of it, is smaller than one blade on a utility system. So this is really not a very big system. So here's a view from a quarter mile. From a mile, you can see it. All these are at the same camera setting, and I do have to apologize. You can tell that I'm not a professional photographer. You can kind of see it there from a mile away. From a mile and a half, you better know where you're looking to see it, because like I said, I could find it, but I really had to know that it was there to see it there. So where do we go from here? Certainly if you go to the NYSERDA website, there's a lot of information there. Current funding, send an email to smallwind@nyserda.org, and any one of us can get back to you. Thank you. Yes?
What is the average cost of, like, say, a 2 kW system? Range?
Yeah, you're probably in the $30,000 to $40,000. The biggest thing is, depending on your site, is really critical. You're going to be having to put in a foundation, and a fairly substantial foundation. The ease of trying to get to it. Like I say, the Birdie, the 10 kW is probably the most of what I see, and that's most residentials. That's probably the size you'd want to really do all of your energy costs. And again, for a New York State wind regime. And those probably, I'm going to say, in the 70,000, 80,000. Now realize NYSERDA is probably going to pick up half of that if you do have a good wind site, and then you have that federal 30% credit you can also be eligible for.
Is it loud?
I'm going to say no. It really...
What was the question?
The question was, is it loud? Actually, we had one town board where someone complained and they said, well, we like to sit on our porch on calm nights. Is this going to be making a lot of noise? Well, on a calm night, it's not. So, yes, it does. And when you say, and here's where wording is very critical, and I don't like to use the term noise. It does make a sound, and because noise has a negative connotation to it. So, and we also say that it will make a sound that's not typical in a rural environment. But usually when it is the loudest is also when the wind's blowing the loudest, when the trees are making, the leaves in the trees are making a lot of noise, sounds. So it's not that noticeable. Most of them, they say it's about maybe 5 decibels at a property line from the system. We just had one where it's an apple orchard out in the western part, and the neighbors were complaining about, before it went in, about how noisy it was going to be. It just went up. They found out, they walked down the orchard, they get about 100 yards from it, you can't even hear it. And again, this is also the importance of getting it up tall enough. Where you get the noise from a wind turbine is when it's furling, when it's looking for the wind, and when it's in a turbulent condition. If you're in that nice steady wind, it's just going to be spinning up there and you won't even notice it.
So what are some of the capacity factors you've heard after a year, 2, 3 years of operation? Because you said 10 kW, and that's probably, you know, a large solar PV application. So I'm guessing, what, 6, 8%?
Yes, you're probably, truthfully, I hate capacity factors for small wind, because basically you're starting with a fictitious number, the manufacturer's nameplate rating. You're assuming it's going to produce that for 87, 60 hours a year, which it's not going to do. Right. So, yeah, utility-size turbines have capacity factors in the 30 to 40 range. So yes, small wind, you're down in the single digits, in the teens.
Actually, New York's about, I think, 26% on our big wind.
Okay.
So I was wondering what you said, small teens?
Yeah.
That's better than I thought.
And again, it depends on your site.
Okay.
All right,
Got it.
thanks.
We're gonna move on, maybe Mark will stick around.
Sure.
Thanks, I'm sorry we gotta keep it going, but hopefully the speakers will stick around and answer some more questions. All right.
All right, so we installed a ground source heat pump, also called geothermal geo-exchange, at our home in North Greenbush. And not to be confused, of course, with geothermal energy production. This is just to heat our home. So we had a little bit of motivation in making this decision. The first one was our oil supplier attempted to refill our oil tank one day, and it spurted out everywhere and all over the floor of our basement. And obviously refused to refill it again. The second one is kind of obvious. We have cold winters. And the third one, at this time, this was during that time when I called our oil supplier and they said $4 a gallon if you want to prepay for your 1,000 gallons next year. So my husband and I thought about it, and we had decisions to make. We were looking at quite a few $1,000s up front for the next heating season, and thankfully this was in the spring. And we really were tired of this up-down oil price situation and being dependent on that so fully for our heat and of course for our autos. So we wanted to decrease that dependency. Where we live, we did not have access to natural gas, which is an awesome option for heating your home. We do have that geeky desire for green technology. Both of us are engineers. We both wanted to research quite a few things. And through that process, we came up with two possible options, solar thermal and geothermal. Solar thermal would have been great in a new application, to have radiant heat through your floors and your toes all toasty all winter. But in our 1940s Cape Cod, it just really wasn't reasonable. So we went on to geothermal. So just to give you a basic idea of what geothermal looks like, this is similar to my system. We have a vertical well. This is one loop, the gray loop, and this loop has water and methanol, 5% methanol. That is basically your refrigerant. That loop now gives, or the heat is given to the loop from the ground, and 20 feet down, the heat of the ground is consistent. And around here, it's about 47 degrees. This is the whole point of geothermal, is we're using that constant heat. And now the heat is given to my refrigerant loop, which then goes through a compressor process, and now we have hot air blowing into our home. So we have two heat transfer situations there. Let me look at my notes. There's a few variations here. This loop is a well for us and for many ground source heat pumps. You can also have pipes that go straight out. So you can have a field of pipes going out about 8 feet below the surface, and you can get reasonably good heat from that. It just is a lot more piping. We didn't have that option because we have stone 3 to 6 feet down at our home. So we couldn't go that 8 feet to make sure it didn't freeze. Another option I've seen, but it made me a little nervous, is to have this refrigerant go straight down. So you lose this heat transfer right here, and so obviously it would be a lot more efficient. It made me a little nervous to have the refrigerant go into the ground. I was more comfortable with the 5% methanol solution. So those are some variations that you'll see. The steps that we took towards getting our geothermal system is, I started with incentives. I work here, I've heard incentives, let's see what they are. There is actually a typo here, I'm sorry. This is Desire USA, not USE. The Desire database is like, it's a federal database that they keep track of every incentive out there, state and federal. And I always go there whenever my brain is scheming some kind of project. I also go to NYSERDA, which not only has state incentives, but they also have approved installers, those very, very good information. So after going to both NYSERDA and the Desire database, NYSERDA had this great list of installers, and I also called the geothermal manufacturers that I could find online. These are just some of them, there might be more. And I compared the two lists, and I got a much shorter list of who I wanted to call. After calling the local reps and installers, I had several of them come to my home. One of them decided to just give me an estimate over the phone, so obviously he was knocked off my list of possible installers. And they did walkthroughs, I got estimates. And then I had to compare the estimates. One thing that I don't have on here, which is probably one of the most important things, is word of mouth. I put it out there both at work and through friends that I was thinking about geothermal. Through that, I found 3 people who had geothermal systems. And it was because of their success with their geothermal systems that it even made me want to pursue it more. But above all, and I put this in here, trust your instincts. When you're doing geothermal, it's not a 2-day thing. It's several months, especially if you are doing the type of process I had to do. And if you don't trust your installer, and if you don't feel like your installer is going to call you back, there's just no reason to go with them. I got ranges from $30,000 to $60,000. I got ranges from a 3-ton system to a 6-ton system. So clearly there are different ways that people are calculating what I needed. What I went with, I didn't go with the cheapest system, but I certainly didn't go with the $60,000 system. And I went with the installer that did a manual J calculation, and that's the Air Conditioner Company Association manual or something like that. And that calculates what is the heat loss of my home. He went through my home and he measured my windows, measured my walls, knew exactly what kind of insulation I had. So he knew what I needed. And that's what I felt most comfortable with. So some of our project details. First of all, my home is about 1,950 square feet, Cape Cod, built in 1940. We replaced all the windows, and we did supplement some insulation. We have a retrofit of radiators, which made this an even more expensive and difficult project. We had to have a well rather than going out horizontally. We have 2 zones, upstairs, downstairs. It's a 3-ton system. And this is something that's interesting because a lot of people will back off from this immediately. Is our system is planned to use 16% backup heat. That's electric heat, which is something a lot of people don't want. And the reason for this is the economies told us that this was the way to go. And the more we insulated our house, the smaller that number would become. So we are going to grow into, or we have been growing into our system. We also upgraded on the filter. We went with a direct current pump, which was more efficient. And we also, I want to stress manual J, manual S calculations. Manual J is that heat loss. Manual S is what tells you how much airflow should go into each room and that recirculation. So where all those vents should be and how big they are. When you hear about geothermal, a lot of people throw out, hey, it's 300% efficient. And I think we all know that's an impossible number. And it is, but it's the way that they compare with traditional systems. because geothermal is not only generating heat or making heat, it's moving the heat. So this 300 to 400% comes from, for every 1 BTU you put into it, you get 3 BTUs out. So that's where that number comes from. And again, it's the movement of heat, which is a lot less than making it. So with, just thought I'd show you some pictures. With a retrofit like ours, where you go from radiators to forced air, it's extensive. Work for us started in the basement. That is the geothermal system. This little box right here, that's all it is. This refrigerator is not running, so don't think we're wasting all the electricity on that. So, but that's it. And it's actually a good scale, so you can see how big it is. It has these trunks coming out, and then these smaller ones that go out. This is the one going to my kitchen. And the whole basement was just, a mess for like 2 weeks. They had all the metal stuff in there and doing all the stuff they had to do. To show you what the ductwork looks like, and I chose this photo because we had those cast iron low radiators. This is what it looked like after we pulled them out. And this is the ductwork. It comes right out of your floor. And for our second floor, it comes out of the ceiling. Now, we were lucky, in a sense. We had a center closet in both hallways, both the first floor and the second floor, that were like this. This is the second floor closet. And this sideways pictures, to give you perspective, I'm looking down at the floor of the closet, and that's going down through the first floor closet and then down to the basement. Where we lucked out is then we could have a trunk coming from our system in the basement all the way up to the attic, which then allows for the ductwork to come through the ceiling of the second floor. And Jim, I don't know what you were apologizing for. Look at my closet. At least yours is wallpapered.
Needs ferns.
So then the fun started. We had the well people come, and as you can see, first we had dirt, which, nice, and then we had stone. We had dirt for like 3 feet. And this slurry of stone mush, it was like 30 feet long by the time they were done that day. It was horrible. They drilled a 450-foot well right there, 50 feet away from my home. And then they put in the loop, it's just a plastic, and I forget exactly what kind of plastic, that it just goes down and up. It's a U shape, and they get it down there. Yep.
You know the diameter of that well?
It's 6 inches. It's just a regular well rig can do it. Yeah, it's interesting. What the hard part for them was, which I found interesting, was they got that loop in, and then they had to grout it, and they have this like nice thermal conductivity grout. As they were grouting, the thing wanted to pop up, so it took 2 guys to hold it in while they were grouting this 450-foot loop. So that was pretty interesting. Now this loop stops, even though they show it at the top there, this loop, they cut it down to about 5 feet below, as far as they could go below the surface. And then they dug a trench to my home, and then that loop goes into my home. As you can see here, the first attempt was not so good. This was about 1 foot below the surface of the soil, and obviously would freeze in the winter, even with methane. I mean, maybe not freeze, but it wouldn't be very efficient. They thought there was a rock under there, and they thought they hit stone. But once they really got in there, the installer said that was not appropriate. So once they got in there, it just was a big rock, and they had to move it. So now they got it down. This is where it actually comes into our basement. And then here, the trench goes right to that place in the basement on the outside. Ouch, the $36,000 question, right? This is what our bill was. It came in at $38,000 $672, but then we told them we'd take out all our radiators ourselves. So that cut off a whopping $2,000. Now this is before incentives, and this is, I know, quite expensive. The considerations that we took here was several years before we had gotten an estimate for air conditioning, because we didn't have air conditioning, and I had just moved to the Northeast, so was not used to this humidity. And the estimate was about $9,500, of which $8,000 was to put in all new ductwork, because that's what you need with air conditioning. So, okay, so that brings it down a little bit. The other consideration we made was we were going to have to buy a new fuel tank. So that's $2,000 that we were told it would cost to install and purchase the tank itself. So, and then we were thinking $4 a gallon for gas or for oil. We go through about 1,000 gallons a year. So we decided to take the plunge. This is not a plunge for anyone. I understand that. That's a lot of money. But one thing we did do, again, with our, our minds is I took 4 years worth of oil data and got a rate by heating degree day, which I felt would be the most appropriate, because heating degree day is what you can bring across several different fuel sources. I track oil prices on the NYSERDA website, and I also installed sub-meters. So I have an electric meter for my geothermal system, my hot water system, because my geothermal preheats my hot water, as well as my auxiliary heat, or that emergency heat. Now the savings. The federal incentive gives you 30% back, and this is not lowering your income by that value or anything. This is dollars you get back. If you can't get it all back in 1 year, they'll bring it over several years. This is good through 2016.